Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Breaking news tonight. New signs of a last-minute push by Donald Trump's Justice Department to indict James Comey's former deputy at the FBI. That's the man who took over the entire Russia probe after Comey's surprise firing by Donald Trump. Now, this is a bombshell from the Washington Post. The reporting is the DOJ has already authorized prosecutors to indict this former top FBI official, Andrew McCabe. And it is over an apparent technicality regarding statements that he made to other DOJ officials, effectively investigative colleagues, as they were probing his contacts with the press. Now, this kind of indictment would mark the kind of politicized retaliation or criminalization of public service that critics have been warning about in the Trump era. As president, Donald Trump publicly attacked McCabe personally, identified him repeatedly, and also attacked his wife. He also demanded the DOJ fire McCabe before he ever received his government pension. Now, the president does not have the authority to personally remove certain FBI officials, so this was all seen as a public way to put the pressure on. Critics say maybe that pressure is working. McCabe, again, was Comey's deputy to the FBI. He became, as you may recall, acting FBI director after the firing of Comey, so he was in charge of the FBI's Russia probe, and that was before Bob Mueller was even appointed. Now, at this point, it is not clear if McCabe will actually be indicted by the Trump Justice Department. But new details tonight emerging about how McCabe's team was told, prosecutors recommended charges, and the top federal prosecutor in Washington, the U.S. attorney from the Justice Department, also on board, according to this Washington Post report. Now, McCabe's team has been appealing that plan today. They say they've learned that appeal was rejected. Another potential clue here that is new about whether these charges are coming, and it would be a bombshell story. Well, the grand jury that was dealing with this and investigating McCabe was suddenly recalled this week, and that's after a months-long hiatus. The Post reporting that panel was let go Thursday. Now, that timing piece, that could mean anything. It could mean they did already approve this indictment. That's not yet what the Washington Post is reporting. It could mean they met and didn't go forward on this indictment, or it could mean they did something else. As you may know from following the Mueller probe, these grand juries, they're pretty secret. But what we are seeing in this report is news about a potential indictment of the person who literally ran the Trump-Russia probe. If that's the talk of investigating the investigators, the Washington Post is reporting, that talk may be hitting now. I want to turn to former Watergate Special Prosecutor Nick Ackerman, who has been on this probe since the very beginning. Before we get to what you may think is wrong with this, and many people say there is something wrong, walk us through what it means to you to hear that the DOJ has, quote, authorized charges against McCabe, and we learned the grand jury met again.
Well, first of all, the optics on this are absolutely terrible. I mean, here you've got a situation where Trump, as president of the United States, has actually asked for this person to be indicted. So, I mean, that in itself, whether McCabe did anything wrong or he didn't do anything wrong, Trump has basically put this case in a position where it is super politicized. Not to mention the fact that they singled this guy out so he would not get his pension and fired him the day before he would have qualified for the pension. Now, whether or not what we're hearing about the grand jury makes any sense, to me, if they want an indictment, the grand jury is going to go along with the government. It is extremely unusual for a grand jury not to return an indictment if the government prosecutors recommend it.
Can you think of any example in U.S. history where a president's administration indicted the person who ran the FBI or an investigation touching on the president?
Never.
I mean,
never.
Nixon didn't even try this.
No. I mean, he was not that stupid.
So now we get to the real question for you then is, if the Washington Post reporting is right, and we credit them, this is their report tonight, and we don't know what's going to happen, but if it's going in that direction, is that wrong? Is that itself an abuse of power?
Well, it certainly reeks of that. I mean, the optics, like I say, are absolutely terrible. I mean, Jeff Rosen, who's the Deputy Attorney General, is the same person who turned down the appeal and was the one who arranged for Paul Manafort to get a cushy club fed to spend his time in jail as opposed to being in Rikers Island awaiting trial here in New York. I mean, he already has a track record of doing Trump's bidding and political bidding. So it does raise questions. We don't know the facts. We don't know exactly what it is they would charge McCabe with. But like I say, this doesn't have a good smell to it.
And the other piece is the public and now potentially legal attacks on people exercising their free speech rights to criticize the president, and how much of this pressure goes on. Because Mr. McCabe, what everyone thinks of him, he did come out and clearly say that what bothered him most about Donald Trump was the criticism and the attacks and the undermining of DOJ and FBI, something the president's been criticized for by many, not just these people caught up in the probe. He was on this program once. I talked to him about that. Let's take a look at that.
In my view, the worst thing that this president does is the same behavior and actions that he engages in almost every day. And it is this unrelenting assault on the FBI, men and women in law enforcement and intelligence professionals. I think that constant attack, that denigration, has a corrosive impact on those institutions.
He's totally correct. I mean, that is the problem. When you have a person as President of the United States who is constantly raising the issue and asking that his political enemies be prosecuted, that they be locked up, it undermines the entire integrity of our justice system. It makes people question whether the Department of Justice is acting fairly in the exercise of its duties. I mean, that is a terrible position to have our government in and to have our Department of Justice in. I don't think that has ever been exercised by any president on any Department of Justice. I mean, even at least when Nixon fired the Attorney General who wouldn't fire Cox and fired the Deputy Attorney General, I mean, things went along as normal. Nobody was investigated because they were an enemy or investigated or threatened to be put into jail.
Right. And when you put it that starkly, it is quite concerning. It's based on the Washington Post saying the man who ran the Russia probe is up for potential charges. They already, according to the Post, want to do it out of one office, and now it's hanging in the balance. And that can chill and go in the minds of every other person in law enforcement in America every time they have a case, and there are many open, that deal with this president's, I will say, unusual governance, because they're thinking not only the pressure, not only losing the job or the pension, but going to jail, which everyone in law enforcement knows it's a deterrent for a reason.
It is Friday, the 13th of September of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, it's Friday the 13th. We have a full moon awaiting us when the moon rises, and right now, the French 77s are poured and awaiting your virtual imbibing pleasure, so please do. And we made it to Friday, so that means that it's going to be another one of those weekends. Impeachment is well underway. We'll have a vote next week. The parameters have been set of how we're going to attend to this. And there's a few people like Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan who just think that it's the most terrible thing to do. Of course they would, because when you follow the rubles, you'll go through the NRA. And when you follow the rubles through the NRA, you're going to find them in the campaign coffers of every single GOP member, especially the ones with the best ratings from the NRA. Well, there's that. And, of course, because of this investigation, the investigators must be investigated. So Barr and Trump are going to try to get McCabe thrown in jail. I would hope that when the king is dethroned, that his ministers shall be, you may be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Why don't we do that? Not because we're going after enemies, but because they actually broke the law. How is it that the FBI director, who is tasked with speaking to the press, and in this matter that they're accusing McCabe of, it was a normal part of his job? But they're saying that he had divulged classified material to the press, the media, about apparently the Hillary Clinton investigation. Oh, they're defenders and stalwarts of feminism and all of the wrongs that have been perpetrated against Hillary. Now they are. Do they really think that America is as stupid as the people that voted for Duma Donnie? I know that it's wrong to include the people who voted for him because they're just confused people. No, they're not. When they talk about the dysfunction in Washington and about how bad Congress is, there's only one party that is a member to that dysfunction, and that is the Republican Party. And I don't just mean the elected officials, I mean the people who elected them. The Republican Party looks to be what's wrong with America. Look at this ad that they put out about AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. How is it that we have the interstate highway system? We didn't turn into Pol Pot's killing fields over that. What makes anybody think that we're going to turn into Pol Pot's killing fields because we'll have Medicare for all? What kind of mind makes that connection? Attending to the ill and infirm and the elderly and all of us is somehow akin to Pol Pot's killing fields? Now, let's be clear. Pol Pot was not the elite. He was not the educated elite of his country. He was the Trump of his day. So it's a bit of perverse projection to have Pol Pot's killing fields thrust upon Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when it would be you-know-who, with the orange hair, who has grievance upon grievance, and he lashes out in a personal way. Who's going to be rounding up people wearing eyeglasses because they might be intellectuals? Who would do that? The educated elite? Or the populist of the people, who are just so tired of all those eggheads telling us what to do? Who's going to turn us into the killing fields? We already have one party threatening presidential candidates with their AR-15s. I hope the FBI visits that guy in Texas. Nothing will come of it because he's white. But perilous times, folks, perilous time. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. While Trump is diverting military resources to build his wall, recruits are using duct tape to patch the holes in their walls at their barracks. GOP Senator Joni Ernst refused to answer questions about her secret plan to cut Social Security. And in a blockbuster development, California is banning all private prisons, including ICE concentration camps and icebox baby gulags. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Trump says he does not believe the Israelis are spying on him because of all the love letters he's gotten from Bibi. See how easy it is to spy on the guy? Jeez. And scientists have found the first evidence of water in the atmosphere of a rocky planet. All that and more. On West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and thank you, Kelly, for doing so. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon site. And all kidding aside, please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. For those of you who have been listening to the show, you've heard this before, and I apologize for being a broken record, but we're just leaving the record player on for the kids. All right? Because they like to hear the sounds. And the sounds are that we need to keep buying new record players because the old ones wear out. And that's what's happened to this, digital machinery that we have here that's running this powerhouse of resistance, as it has done for the last 8 years. Continuously, 24/7, 365 resistance radio. And your generosity has allowed us to do that, and your generosity sustains us in being able to do so, and we thank you immensely. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and also I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and they get that linked up on social media. And you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, everywhere. Everywhere podcasts are, you're going to find us indeed. All right, let's see. TuneIn. We're on TuneIn as also. Isn't that amazing? Okay, this first offering here comes out of Share Blue Media by the great Oliver Willis. Senator Martin Heinrich, Democrat of New Mexico, told Trump's nominee for Secretary of the Air Force that while Trump is diverting military resources to build his wall, trainees are using duct tape to patch the holes in the walls at their facility. The exchange occurred during a confirmation hearing in the Senate Armed Services Committee for Barbara M. Barrett, Trump's nominee to serve as Secretary of the Army. And Ryan D. McCarthy also testified. Heinrich noted that Trump's proposal would cut $85 million from the training facility at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, a new building that is desperately needed to effectively train all of our MQ-9 operators. Well, MQ-9 is a military drone that has been used in combat in Afghanistan. Maybe since we're winding down the war there, we can use the drones here for ICE's urban warfare plan that they've been planning. Yeah. Bring the troops home so we can use them here. Wow. Were you aware that we train 100% of the active reserve and international MQ-9 operators at Holloman facility? Heinrich asked. Senator, I was not aware of that, no, replied Barrett. Are you aware of the fact that current trainees are resorting to using duct tape to patch holes in the walls and ceilings of their training facility? He then asked. Oh, no, Senator, she answered. I think we can do better than that, Heinrich said, noting that because of the conditions of the facilities, the MQ-9 operators are being forced to train in an unclassified, unsecure environment. And I would say, once again, that's a feature, not a bug. If you're so willing to hand over the United States to Vlad, what's like securing some out-of-the-way drone operator facility? Who cares about that? Barrett could not give Heinrich concrete steps for how money could be found to fund the project. Along with Trump, Republican senators who have seen funds diverted from military needs in their states have come under fire for the controversial series of policy decisions. Now, we all know that Trump promised during the presidential campaign that Mexico would pay for his wall, but they refused. Wow. He could not convince the Democratic-held led House to spend billions of tax dollars on his idea. And now, military readiness is under threat for the wall. Dan Desai Martin, also of Share Blue Media, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Senator Joni Ernst, Repug of Iowa, avoided reporter questions about her desire for Congress to hide from the public when discussing possible changes in cuts to Social Security. Senator... Now, she was captured on video by the liberal research firm American Bridge. Ernst was asked as she exited a car, "Senator, why do you want to change Social Security in secret?" Ernst refused to answer the question and quickly walked away, ducking into what appeared to be the Kimpton George Hotel in downtown Washington, D.C. Appeared to be? In a press release, American Bridge said Ernst was there for a private fundraiser. The question arose from controversial comments Ernst made about Social Security at a town hall in late August. Ernst spoke about Social Security, saying Congress needs to sit down behind closed doors to discuss the program in order to avoid being scrutinized by this group or the other. So much for sunshine and open government now, eh? In the past, Ernst has floated privatizing Social Security as a possible option because, look, if the interstate highway system didn't give us the killing fields, look, Social Security's even got social in its title, and it has not given us the killing fields. Maybe privatizing it will. Of course, Ernst's comments about Social Security were met with concern by some groups in Iowa. I would hope some. Not all, of course, because if it was all groups, well, we would be further along into a more lovely society than we would expect. But, of course, there's some groups that like her idea. Regardless, the groups that oppose it or are concerned about it say, we knew that the Republican tax bill, which Ernst supported, was passed. Senate Republicans would use the bill as an exercise to go after Social Security and Medicare, and that is exactly what they are going to do. And that was Emily Hawley, Executive Director of Iowa Voices. Now she is openly mocking her constituents by leaving them out of the conversation and moving behind closed doors. Iowa families deserve better, Hawley added. Zach Hudson, a spokesman for American Bridge, said Ernst's decision to avoid questions about her controversial remarks spoke volumes. We guess we shouldn't be surprised that a politician who said she wants to change Social Security in secret would avoid scrutiny and would be afraid to answer questions about it as she sprints into a swanky fundraiser. If Joni Ernst is so proud, Hudson continued, of her plan to gut Social Security, maybe she should actually start talking about it instead of relying on her D.C. handlers to whisk her away from questions. It is unclear if Ernst discussed her remarks about cutting Social Security at the private fundraiser, because usually you get the crap beat out of you if you show up at those places and you're not one of them. Of the UK Guardian brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The private prison industry is set to be upended after California lawmakers passed a bill on Wednesday banning the facilities from operating in the state. The move will probably close down 4 large immigration detention facilities as well that can hold up to 4,500 people at a time in each. The legislation is being held as a major victory for criminal justice reform because it removes the profit motive from incarceration. It also marks a dramatic departure from California's past, when private prisons were relied on to reduce crowding in state-run facilities. Private prison companies used to view California as one of their fastest-growing markets. As recently as 2016, private prisons locked up approximately 7,000 Californians, about 5% of the state's total prison population. Now, that was according to the Federal Bureau of Justice statistics. But in recent years, thousands of inmates have been transferred from private prisons back into state-run facilities. As of June, private prisons held 2,222 of California's total inmate population. Wow, that's just too many. The state's governor, Gavin Newsom, must still sign AB 32, but last year he signaled support for the ban and said during his inaugural speech in January that the state should end the outrage of private prisons once and for all. Now, I should add that this also comes on the heels of the Trump administration suing California to over auto emission controls, that California cannot have more strict air emission controls on their vehicles than what the federal government says because of profit. Currently, one company, the Geo Group, operates 4 private prisons in California under contract with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Oh, you mean retribution. There's no rehab there. The contracts for these 4 prisons expire in 2023 and cannot be renewed under AB 32 except to comply with a federal court order to reduce crowding in state-run facilities. In addition to signaling a major criminal justice reform, AB 32 also has become a flashpoint in California's fight with the Trump administration over the treatment of immigrants. The bill's author, Assembly member Rob Bonta, originally wrote it only to apply to contracts between the state's prison authority and private for-profit prison companies. But in June, Bonta amended the bill to apply to immigration and customs enforcement agencies for major California detention centers, which we refer to here, according to the Netroots Radio style menu, as concentration camps and icebox baby gulags. Bonta's amendment says immigrant right advocates appear to have caught ICE and private prison companies at a moment when their current contracts are expiring. The result is that instead of slowly phasing out immigration detention centers as their existing contracts expire years down the road, most will face closure next year, unless ICE and its private prison contractors find a workaround. I think Geo Group is realizing their scheme to circumvent state laws, putting them in a place where they could end up being nailed, said Ahmed Yazdan Pana, an immigration attorney and the regional director for the Northern California Rapid Response and Immigrant Defense Network. Two of ICE's largest detention centers for immigrants in California are operated by the Geo Group through complicated contracts that use cities as middlemen. The city of Adelanto signed an agreement in 2011 with ICE to hold up to 1,300 immigrant detainees facing deportation. The city then subcontracted the prison operations to Geo Group. What ICE does is they locate in these very poor and remote areas, said Elizabeth Albin, an Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice member. The private prison comes in and lobbies and promises jobs and tax money. According to the report by the California State Auditor, this complicated subcontracting model allowed ICE and Adelanto to forego competitive bidding for the center's operations subcontract. A similar process unfolded just north of Bakersfield and McFarland, where in 2015, the city agreed to serve as the middleman of the Geo Group, which operates the 400-bed Mesa Verde Detention Center. Geo Group expanded the Adelanto Center in 2015 to 1,940 beds, making it the second largest concentration camp in this country. And with the Trump administration's crackdown against undocumented immigrants, another 1,000-bed expansion is planned. I don't think they're called beds. I think they're called cages. And each cage can hold, I don't know how many. Geo Group reportedly sought to purchase property in Bakersfield for a major expansion of Mesa Verde. But these complicated contracts were outlawed last year. Under the state's Dignity Not Detention Act, cities and counties, including Adelanto and McFarland, were barred from signing new agreements with ICE or amending existing contracts to permit expansion. The legislation is the most powerful we've had. It's a very big step, said Albin about AB 32, but we know Geo Group and ICE work in secrecy, and they work to circumvent contract laws, so we're still monitoring things. Severin said that while the new law was a significant victory, there was one other thing immigrant rights groups were concerned about. When several sheriff's departments canceled their contracts to house ICE detainees last year, instead of freeing detainees, ICE moved many of them to prisons in Colorado and Hawaii. We not only have to worry about all the people who are detained right now, we also have to worry about where they will end up. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Revenge Down Under. Australian director Jennifer Kent is best known to American audiences for her 2014 debut horror offering, The Babadook. Her sophomore effort, The Nightingale, is arguably scarier because it is based on the very real horrors that occurred in 19th century Australia on the part of the British colonizers. Set in the 1820s on the island of Tasmania, The Nightingale tells the story of Claire, an Irish convict who has served her sentence but is still being held in indentured servitude by a vile lieutenant named Hawkins. When Claire dares to ask for her freedom, she is brutally raped and her husband and baby killed in front of her. Justifiably set on revenge, Claire hires an Aboriginal guy, Billy, played by newcomer by Kali Ganambar, in a stunning debut to track down Hawkins and his men as they journey cross-country to another town. The deep sympathy that the audience feels for Claire evaporates a bit when we see how she treats Billy, who makes it clear he's only doing the job for the money. He's used to being treated with a mixture of hostility and condescension by the settlers, but the horrors he sees during their quests unsettle even him. Eventually, he and Claire both come to realize they're both marginalized people with a common enemy. As the film continues, whether Claire will succeed in her revenge becomes less of a question than how the revenge you know is coming will actually manifest. At times, The Nightingale can be a bit slow-paced, and some of the brutality portrayed is downright uncomfortable. But overall, it is still riveting and sheds light on the fact that the U.S. isn't the only place with a horrible racial past. Add Ganambar's performance in the gorgeously captured Australian countryside, and this one shouldn't be missed. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Seems like anytime you see a squirrel, it's busy doing something. It's headed somewhere, scrounging for food, and being out and about all the time also means
they're tasty morsels for a lot of different predators.
Keith Tarvin, a behavioral ecologist at Oberlin College. He says squirrels scan their surroundings for hawks and owls, cats and foxes, but they also have another surveillance system. They eavesdrop on nearby birds.
Eavesdropping on alarm calls or eavesdropping on chatter is a cheap and easy way to supplement the information that they have access to because it's free. It's produced by other individuals in the environment. It's publicly available to any organism that has the cognitive ability to recognize and interpret that information.
Tarvin's colleague Marie Lilly tested that ability by riding around town on her bicycle, stopping when she found a squirrel. Then she'd set up her equipment, play the fearsome scream of a red-tailed hawk, and then either play the casual, unworried chatter of songbirds or ambient noise as a control. All the while, she observed the squirrel's behavior. And she noticed that when squirrels heard the reassuring chatter of songbirds following the hawk's scream, they relaxed more readily.
Imagine this. If you're walking in a crowd and everyone seems pretty happy and content and they're chit-chatting with each other, you might even subconsciously take that as information that all of those eyes and ears apparently seem to perceive the environment as being safe. And we think the squirrels might be listening in on bird chatter in the same way.
The details are in the journal PLOS ONE. And squirrels give back to the community, too, with their own alarm calls, which might help other eavesdropping animals. But in busy urban environments, Tarvin says that rich fabric of animal communication risks being drowned out by the loudest animals around, us. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. After a storm or disaster, it's important to eat only safe food. Throw away perishables like meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and leftovers stored above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours or more. Throw away food with an unusual odor, color, or texture. Throw away food that may have come in contact with floodwater, including food in swollen, punctured, and damaged cans. When in doubt, throw it out.
This is a message from CDC. After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seat belts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seat belts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
The 13th Amendment, ratified in 1865, that abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, has one enormous exception. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The exception is, and I quote the amendment, except as punishment for crime. And today, the United States, which has 4% of the world's population, has 22% of all the world's prisoners. As Brian Stevenson, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative and author of Just Mercy, writes in his contribution to the 1619 Project, quote, central to understanding the practice of mass incarceration and excessive punishment is the legacy of slavery. After the Civil War, Southern states passed the Black Codes, a series of laws that locked up and subjugated former slaves. Again quoting Stevenson, Nixon's war on drugs, mandatory minimum sentences, 3 strikes laws, children tried as adults, broken window policing, these policies were not as expressly racialized as the black codes, but their implementation has been essentially the same. Stevenson points out that there is new language that has replaced the black codes: driving while black, sitting in a coffee shop while black, in a word, living while black. And in the same vein, he writes, quote, "It has been black people and brown people who are disproportionately targeted, stopped, suspected, incarcerated, and shot by the police." The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
From the very start of our nation, the most popular forum for debating and shaping our democratic rights was not stately legislative halls, but rowdy beer halls. Indeed, pub democracy remains strong across our country, as is now being shown by a hardy group of democracy rebels in Toledo, Ohio. The people of this city on the edge of Lake Erie were literally sickened in 2014 when a toxic algae bloom poisoned the lake, which is their source of drinking water. People were outraged that state officials who were in the pocket of the polluters did nothing to protect the lake from more poisoning. Mulling this over while quaffing beers in a local pub, the rebels hit upon a novel thought. What if Lake Erie could protect itself by asserting its legal right to, quote, exist, flourish, and naturally evolve? Thus was born the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, which the group proposed as a city charter ballot initiative. They got double the number of signatures required to put the proposition on February's ballot, mounted a door-to-door people's campaign to counter a media blitz partially funded by such giants as Coca-Cola and FedEx, and they won. A whopping 61% of Toledo's voters said yes to recognizing legally enforceable rights for the natural world. Supercilious corporate elites, however, refused to let such a trifling matter as the will of the people interfere with their sense of entitlement to poison for profit. So they've now gotten top Ohio officials to assert in a court filing that the state is the, quote, proprietor in trust of Lake Erie. Therefore, claim the officials, local voters have no power to deny so-called corporate persons the permission to pollute real people's water. This is Jim Hightower saying, of course, the democracy rebels are not about to back down, so keep up with them at www.lakeerieaction.org.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2013. Riot police used tear gas and water cannons to clear out Zocalo Square in Mexico City. The square was occupied by protesting teachers. The teachers had been on strike for weeks. They wanted changes made to educational reforms that had been passed by the Mexican government. The education reforms included new performance-related testing for teachers. But the reforms did little to address the economic disparity faced by many school children. The evaluation tests did not take into account the difficult conditions for teachers in the poorest regions of Mexico. The teachers worried the tests would lead to mass layoffs. Police wanted to clear Zocalo Square before Mexico's annual independence celebration. Most protesters left peacefully. However, some remained. Police, using armored vehicles and helicopters, clashed with the remaining protesters. Officers tore down protesters' temporary shelters and put out small bonfires. Protesters responded by throwing projectiles at the police. The police arrested many of the remaining protesting teachers. After the square was cleared, a BBC reporter noted that police had achieved their goal. Still, the reporter added, the sight of riot police and armored vehicles in the country's most emblematic plaza is not the image of unity the government wanted to portray hours before President Peña Nieto celebrated his first Independence Day as Mexico's president. If it sounds familiar, it is, because teachers in the United States are dealing with similar issues. Teachers, through their unions in both the United States and Mexico, fight for a quality education for all children.
We don't need no education.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid-80s. Overnight lows in the upper 50s to low 60s will be mostly clear today. Sunny conditions will prevail. Winds are currently light and variable out of the southwest, and will be shifting out of the north-northwest in just a few hours at a usual, what I call scouring clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour, continuing so overnight and through tomorrow, though shifting ever so slightly out of the west-northwest. A small chance of rain overnight, increasing over the weekend, and we should have a good amount of water falling from the sky beginning on Sunday, maybe going till Wednesday. Ragweed pollen is the dominant pollen affecting people currently, and it is rated as moderate. The air quality index remains at 28 parts per million and in the good range, and the daytime UV index is still high at 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.15 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 72 and sunny. Paris is 75 and partly cloudy. Rome is 88 and fair. Kiev is 82 and fair. Kabul is 78 and fair. Hong Kong, 84 and fair. Tokyo is 72 degrees and partly cloudy, still the remnants of a typhoon. And Sydney, Australia is 57 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 68 degrees and fair, though they do have a heat advisory today. And New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees and Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And why wouldn't they be anonymous, considering it's a story about one Donald J. Trump, who we affectionately call, or derisively, Duma Donnie. Well, Duma Donnie said yesterday, Thursday, he does not believe Israel is spying on the United States after a published report said Israel was most likely behind cell phone surveillance devices found near the White House and elsewhere in Washington. Politico reported the miniature surveillance devices, colloquially known as stingrays, were discovered and that they were most likely linked to the Israelis. Israel has denied the report. Wouldn't you?
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Staff at the Washington Post bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In the dim red light of an alien sun, scientists have found the first evidence for water in the atmosphere of a rocky planet, offering a tantalizing new target in the search for life in the universe. The intriguing world, which goes by the impersonal designation K2-18b, lies 110 light-years away in the constellation of Leo. More important, it sits in the star's habitable zone, where it is bathed in the right amount of warmth to allow for liquid water on its surface, the Goldilocks zone. Twice as large as our own planet, and 8 times as massive, K2-18b possesses powerful gravity that would make it difficult to walk upon. I think it would smash you to a flat sort of pancake type of shape, I think. It orbits close to a red dwarf star, much smaller and cooler than our sun, and aside from water vapor, its atmosphere contains mostly hydrogen gas, a molecule that makes up less than 1 part per million of our own atmosphere. I guess we'll have to be poisoned then, won't we? It is no second Earth, said astronomer Angelo Cesarius, the lead author of a study on the planet published Wednesday in the journal Nature Astronomy. But this is the best candidate for habitability that we know right now. The paper by Cesarius draws on publicly available data produced by Bjorn Benneke, a planetary astronomer at the University of Montreal in Canada. Benneke's team posted its own analysis on Tuesday of K2-18b on the preprint server ARXIV, which hosts, I guess that's AR14? Yeah. Researchers say it is not a true Earth analog, though K2-18b is likely solid at its core. The temperatures and pressures at the surface would be so high that few complex molecules would survive, let alone any life forms. But the result is amazing. It's definitely the smallest and coolest planet that we've had a glimpse into the atmosphere of so far, but no astronomer thinks it's potentially habitable. Scientists had detected water only in the atmosphere of gas giants, huge exoplanets that lack solid surfaces, like Jupiter and Saturn. Rocky exoplanets are smaller, making them harder to find and more difficult to study. When K2-18b was discovered in 2015, Cesarius and his colleagues thought it would be a good candidate for a form of analysis called transit spectroscopy, which involves studying the changes in a star's light as a planet transits or passes in front of it. And that's how they determine the chemical makeup of the planet's atmosphere because of the color spectrum that is assigned to the various molecules on the periodic table. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Monday, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.